make this happen more effectively. We already have some projects in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Malawi and Peru, but the idea was really how can we be doing very much more. I also welcome Germany's decision to participate in the India-Pacific Oceans Initiative that we announced in 2019. Where our economic ties are concerned, you all know that India, Germany is our largest partner in the EU. I think we both recognize that the business climate today, the business enthusiasm today is very much stronger. And we certainly, as foreign ministers, would like to channelize that and use it as a positive source of energy for the relationship. We are today supporting the India-EU negotiations on trade, investment and geographical indicators. We hope that they will progress well. The third round of negotiations on the FTA has just concluded. But I think on a broader scale, I think both of us spent time talking about how to create more reliable and resilient supply chains. In the digital world, how to encourage trust and transparency. I think we have a common interest, India and Germany, in ensuring not just a stronger global economy, but also a more secure global economy. So as you can see, on this range of issues, really it's been a very productive morning. There was some talk between us on people-to-people relationships. We have just signed the Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement, and I do think that this will be a very strong signal for a greater, not just a greater flow of talent and skills between our two societies, but I think also as a basis for a more contemporary partnership. One issue which also came up were the visa challenges, and we hope that some of these are addressed in the coming months so that the backlog can be cleared, and I have every confidence that there will be that effort made by our partner. A specific issue which came up, some of you may be familiar with this case. This relates to a child called Ariha Shah. So we have concerns that the child should be in her linguistic, religious, cultural and social environment. This is her right. And our embassy is pursuing the matter with German authorities, but it was also subject I had brought up with the minister. Overall, I would say our bilateral relationship today is very wide, it's very deep, and it really covers, all the key areas: political, strategic, economic, S&T, people-to-people, education. But it can grow very much. And I think we, the two foreign ministers, I think are particularly committed to make that happen. Our meeting today, our discussions were helpful in that regard. Once again, really, Minister, I thank you so much for being here and for partnering me in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Her Excellency Minister Baerbock to make her remarks.
Thank you very much, and I will speak in German. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, lieber Subramaniam, Jaishankar Ji, vielen Dank für den herzlichen Empfang heute hier in New Delhi. Ich habe meinen Besuch in Indien heute
started my visit to India today, as many have done before me, at the Memorial Gandhi Smriti. And I've always been deeply moved by India's rich history, but when I followed Gandhi's last steps today, I became acutely aware of the fact that India's path towards independence truly was not an easy one. Today, almost 75 years after the murder of Gandhi, there is a close bond between our democracies, a bond that unites us on the basis of shared values: human rights, freedom, democracy, trust in an order based on the law. Thank you very much for the open exchange we had today about all these topics. And this open exchange is possible also because, of course, this is my first official visit to India, but it truly doesn't feel like a first official visit. It rather feels like coming to see a good friend. And the fact that we have met several times already this year at the intergovernmental consultations, as you mentioned, in Berlin, the G20 meeting in Bali, or the UNGA in New York, shows how important the close coordination between friends is to us, especially in this year. The very challenging situation the world finds itself in today makes this more than necessary, and it also illustrates that in these difficult times, it is important that we stand together as partners in values, that we really can grow together, and that we are doing so. My visit today could not be more timely. This month, as you said, India's G20 presidency and your presidency in the UN Security Council overlap with our G7 presidency. So you're also having the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. So, Minister Jaishankar, I would like to explicitly thank you for assuming the presidency of the G20, not only in a business-as-usual way, but you also made it very clear in our discussion that this is a very special task and that you will shape with great responsibility. So India is assuming global responsibility in this difficult moment. Responsibility for the most urgent tasks of our time. We have the global impact of the brutal war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, an illegal war that has brought the whole world into a very difficult situation, and it also creates difficulties for your country when it comes to energy supply and fertilizers. We see the climate crisis that has impacts worldwide, in India, in Europe, destroying livelihoods of people. So I am especially delighted that India, during its G20 presidency, with the motto "One Earth, One Family, One Future," is putting a special focus on containing the climate crisis, thus highlighting our common responsibility when it comes to climate change. As industrialized nations, the G20 are not only responsible for 80% of global emissions, they are also responsible for a major part of climate-induced damage, also climate-induced damage that is still to come. We are taking concrete steps in this regard as well. Germany and India will further expand their cooperation for accelerating energy transition. Last week, in the framework of the climate conference, we have made available 10 billion euros up to 2030. And last year, for the first projects in 2023, we have agreed on projects worth 1 billion euros. Concrete projects intended to support India in covering its big energy demand by switching to socially and ecologically sustainable energy sources. By doing so, we are building on the negotiations we had at the COP, and we show that we stand ready as a partner for India, a partner for more climate protection and renewable energy sources. In addition to the climate crisis as the biggest security threat of our time, we have also, of course, spoken about regional challenges. With the adoption of the Indo-Pacific guidelines, Germany has clearly committed to strengthening the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific area on the basis of the UN Charter. With the visit of the frigate Bayern in Mumbai at the beginning of the year, we have also shown in this regard that we underpin these guidelines with concrete actions. In the future, we want to further intensify German-Indian cooperation in the field of security policy. So Germany wants to engage in the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative initiated by Prime Minister Modi. We are also putting a focus on the areas of climate and energy, and we will in particular support the Pacific states in their adaptation to climate change. And also when it comes to the bond between our people, that is so important. We are taking concrete steps today. With the Migration and Mobility Partnership that we have just signed, we are facilitating exchange between our countries. We are supporting, with the Migration and Mobility Partnership, we are supporting the life plans of skilled workers, students and trainees. In concrete terms, we also want to cut red tape, for example, by reducing waiting times for such visa applications, because foreign policy not only means that foreign ministers meet, it also means that there are many people can have contacts with the other country, can live together. I know that with a view to this exchange in India, I know that many Indians have to wait for a long time when they ask for a visa at our embassy. So one of our big tasks is reduce waiting times for such applications. We want highly skilled workers and young people to come to Germany. We want to make it easier for them to study here, to work here, or to start a training program. And we also want to make it easier for German investors and companies to establish a presence in India. Already now, Germany is India's biggest trading partner in the EU. And with this agreement, we are setting the tracks to further intensifying our economic relations in the future, because in order to be economically successful, you need brilliant minds and a lot of innovative potential. We are supporting both with this Migration and Mobility Partnership. As the biggest democracy and emerging economy, India is a role model for many other countries across the globe. And it is therefore ever more important that all parts of society can benefit from that, especially women and girls, who make up half of our population in all our countries. So, as with many visits I will also use my visit to India to speak with representatives of NGOs who stand up for the rights and the protection of women and girls. Mr. Subramaniam, I would like to thank you for the warm welcome you have given me here in New Delhi, but especially I would like to thank you for the intensive exchange we had over this year. Especially in these difficult times, it is so important to speak in a confidential setting about topics where there might be different regional perspectives, but where we see every time that we are partners in values and stand shoulder to shoulder. This is more important than ever, and I'm looking very much forward to our next meeting that will happen rather shortly at the beginning of spring, in the framework of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting, and I would like to thank you very much for the hospitality in your beautiful country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Now we'll invite some questions from our dignitaries. Given time constraints, we'll take two from each side. Let me get the first question proposed by Mrs. Siddhant Sibal from WION. Microphone, please.
Hi, sir. Hi, ma'am. I'm Siddhant from WION. My question to you, sir, is, was there any discussion regarding India's relationship with Afghanistan and Pakistan? And ma'am, to you, you're a very clear-headed, forthright leader. Can you share to the Indian audience your concerns regarding China?
Yes, actually, we had fairly extensive discussions both on Afghanistan and Pakistan. A lot of it was on Afghanistan was our respective assessments of how the situation there is. And, you know, the Indian perspective, which I know Germany shares, there's a UN Security Council Resolution 2593, which largely expresses the views of the international community out there. So how do we today assess it, humanitarian situation, what can we do about it? I think these were some of the issues which came up. Regarding Pakistan, I spent some time with the minister outlining, the nature of our ties, the challenge of cross-border terrorism, and essentially the fact that, we engage Pakistan bilaterally on whatever outstanding issues, but the main challenge today is really the fact that we cannot have talks against terrorism, and I think there was understanding from the German side in this regard.
Mit Blick auf China verfolgen wir, wie auch unsere europäischen Freunde, einen Dreiklang unserer China-Strategie, die wir sowohl im Koalitionsvertrag, wir sind jetzt ja gerade ziemlich genau auf den Tag ein Jahr im Amt, verfolgen wir eine Strategie eines Dreiklangs, nämlich China als Partner bei globalen Herausforderungen zu sehen, als Wettbewerber, aber zunehmend auch als systemischer
rival as well. China
stark verändert.
has changed very much over the last few years, and I think the whole region can see this and feel this. So the exchange with actors from the region is very important to us, especially India as a direct neighbor. This is very important for us to have a good assessment of the challenges ahead. One of the newer points in our China strategy is the Indo-Pacific strategy. We will have more diversification in the Indo-Pacific area. There is huge potential for German and European companies. Until now, we've been focusing very much on China, but there are also ties with India and Japan, but not so many with many other neighboring countries. And when it comes to India, we have both highlighted that there is huge potential for further cooperation, both in terms of economic ties, but also when it comes to the security situation. In Germany, we have seen what it means when you become strongly dependent on one country, a country that does not share your values. So with a view to the political and security policy aspects and developments in the region, we will closely cooperate with our partners in the region.
May I now call upon Ms. Alice Botha from the Zeit to ask a question.
Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very
Frau
much.
Außenministerin, eine Frage
Foreign
an
Minister
Sie.
Baerbock, one
Ist
question to
Indien
you.
jetzt ein Ersatzpartner für
Is
China?
India now a substitute
Und
partner for
eine
China?
Frage an
And a
Herrn
question to
Außenminister.
Foreign Minister
Russland
Jaishankar.
hat Indien kürzlich eine umfassende Wunschliste
Russia
übermittelt.
has sent a
Unterscheidet sich
comprehensive
diese
list of
Wunschliste
requests or
von
demands
dem,
or
was
wishes to India.
üblicherweise
And how
Sie
far
an
is
Herrn
this
Minister
list
betreiben?
different from
Wollen Sie
the
dieser
past?
Wunschliste
And
entsprechen?
will
Und
you
wenn ich noch
comply with that
hinzufügen darf,
list? And can I add,
Indien setzt auf Verhandlungen.
India counts
Und
very much
Russland
on
hat die Voraussetzungen für
negotiations, and
Verhandlungen jetzt klar
Russia
umrissen.
has clearly
Dazu
outlined
gehört auch
the
die
preconditions for
Anerkennung der
negotiations. Part of
annexierten
this
Gebiete in
means
der
the
Ukraine.
recognition of
Sehen Sie das als
annexed
eine
territory
legitime
in Ukraine. Do you think this is a
und halten Sie
legitimate
dennoch an den
foundation?
Verhandlungen
And
fest?
will you still call for negotiations?
Nein. Die kurze Antwort
No,
auf Ersatzpartner,
that's a very brief
weil,
answer to
Indien
the
war schon
substitute
immer
partner. No,
Partner,
India has
für
always been a
Deutschland
partner
und
of
auch
Germany
für die Europäische
and a partner for the
Union.
European
Aber
Union
diese
as well.
Partnerschaft, die wollen
This
wir
partnership,
weiter
however, is
vertiefen
something
und
that we
weiter
want to
ausbauen,
deepen
weil
further
wir
and
in
that
der
want to
Tat auf
expand
brutale
further.
Art
Last year,
gemeinsam
we
in der
have
Welt
seen in a
haben,
very
was es für
brutal way
unterschiedliche
across the globe that there are
Partnerschaften
very
gibt.
different kinds
Und es
of
gibt
partnerships.
Freundschaften,
There are friendships,
Wertepartner.
there are
Und mit
partners in
Indien
values,
verbindet
and
nicht
we
nur
are
eine
connected with
Partnerschaft im
India not only
wirtschaftlichen
by an
Bereich, eine
economic
Partnerschaft im
partnership, but a
Austausch von
partnership
Menschen,
when
sondern
it
es
comes to
verbindet uns eben
people-to-people
mit
connections,
Indien
and
eine
also
Wertepartnerschaft.
a
Und das ist
partnership of
anders als
values,
mit
and that is
anderen Ländern,
different
auch in der Region.
from
Und diese
other countries in the
Wertepartnerschaft,
region. And
insbesondere
this
die wollen wir
partnership of
weiter
values is
ausbauen.
something we want
Das
to
größte
further expand.
Demokratie
As the biggest
weltweit steht
democracy
eben Indien.
in the world,
Beispielhaft für
India
viele,
is
viele andere
exemplary,
Länder auch in der
is a
Welt.
role model
Das
for
heißt, wir
many
wollen
other
gerade mit
countries
Blick
in
auf
the
die
world.
Stärkung
So
unserer
especially when it
gemeinsamen
comes to
demokratischen
strengthening
Werte,
our
aber
joint
auch mit
democratic
unserem
values
gemeinsamen
and
Einfluss
also
auf internationale Recht
when we
vertieft
stand up
zusammenarbeiten.
for
Und das
international
Gleiche
law, we
gilt
want
auch
to
für die
expand our
wirtschaftliche
cooperation, and
Beziehung,
the
weil
same
wir
is true for
auch im
economic
letzten Jahr auf
relations.
brutale Art und
Last year
Weise
too, we've
gesehen
seen in
haben,
a very
dass
brutal
wenn
way
wir tiefe
that
wirtschaftliche
when we have
Beziehungen
deep
zu
economic
Partnern haben,
ties
die
with
eben nicht
partners
Wertepartner
who are
sind,
not
dass
partners
das
in values,
volkswirtschaftlich
this has
dramatische Folgen
economic
haben kann
repercussions,
und dass das
dramatic
dann nicht in
repercussions for
unserem
our economies,
volkswirtschaftlichen
and
Interesse ist.
this is not in our economic interest.
Regarding what you referred to as a list, We have been discussing for some years now with Russia how to expand our trade. Our trade with Russia is really quite more, I would say, actually it's been in the $12–13 billion level. If you compare it to most European countries, most of them have multiple times that trade. It's not something which, a discussion which started after February 24. It's a discussion which has been going on before. I myself have been involved in this discussion for 8 years now. I currently, in fact, head a body with a Russian deputy minister as a counterpart, which is dedicated to actually expanding our economic cooperation. And we have faced challenges. It often happens in trade, you know, phytosanitary standards or non-tariff barriers or regulatory impediments. So at the moment, you know, the discussion, the ongoing discussion and what either side can import from each other, that is the context in which it is taking place. Now, what we have tabled between us, because I would in all fairness also tell you, we have also given the Russians a set of I would say products which we believe we are very competitive in and which we feel should be getting access to the Russian market. And as I said again, this is not a post-February 24 conversation. It is something which has been going on for some time. So when it looks to, you know, what we could be doing, we will see where there is a demand and supply and where there is a fit. I think largely a large part of it would be determined by market, because in our trade business is mostly in private sector hands. But you know, I don't think people read anything more into it other than the legitimate expectations of any trading country to increase its trade. On your second question about negotiations, look, the Indian position has been very clear and very public. The Indian position articulated by my Prime Minister is that this is not an era of war, that dialogue and diplomacy is the answer. It is a position which, by the way, the G20 has also accepted. It was found expression in their Bali declaration. But what is the basis for people to have that dialogue is for the country is concerned. You know, it's not for India to specify or to advocate or to condition. That is not our intention. That has not been our approach. It is something which the parties involved will have to decide among us.
Thank you. Now I ask Mr. Neeraj Kumar from News 18 to ask his question.
Hi ma'am, hi sir. What were the discussions on baby Ariha? My question to both of you.
Well, I tried to answer your question by partly putting that out. I know there's a lot of, you know, it's something which has been much in the media on the Indian side. You know, in fairness, I think what I have said, which is that, you know, in our view, baby Ariha should be in a position to reside in an environment, a linguistic, religious, cultural, social environment which is natural to her. That is our effort. I think it's a very delicate matter. There are privacy issues involved in it. So I think both governments are handling it with that very much in mind. So I think that's as much as I can say publicly.
Ihre Frage war, was meine Position dazu
about my
ist,
position
mit
on
Blick
that
auf
case
den
when
Schutz
it comes to the
von
protection of
Kindeswohl sind in Deutschland
a child's well-being in Germany, and it's similar in India. The youth offices are responsible for that.
Aber als Mutter von zwei
But as a mother
Töchtern
of
möchte ich
two
sagen,
daughters,
dass
I
auch
would
mir
like
das
to say
Wohlergehen
that
von
for me, the well-being
sehr
of Aliyah
wichtig
Shah
ist.
is very
Deswegen habe ich
important
mich
to me.
genau über den
So
Fall
I
informiert und kann
have
Ihnen versichern,
received
dass es
detailed
dem Kind
information
gut
about
geht.
this case. I can
Für
assure
uns
you
alle,
that the
ich glaube,
child
für
is
alle
well,
in Indien,
and
als auch
for
für alle in
everybody in
Deutschland
India and
und
for everybody
insbesondere
in
für die
Germany
deutschen Behörden
and the German
wohl
authorities, particularly the child's well-being is the first priority. And of course, we are also bearing in mind the cultural identity of each child that is taken care of by the youth offices in Germany. Children are only taken in custody by the youth office if serious concerns about their well-being, for example, violent sexual abuse or severe neglect. So, as has been said by my distinguished colleague, it is about privacy rights as well, so we cannot say more at this point. The case is still pending in court, and after the verdict, of course, there can be a review. But for us, what is most important, the first priority, is the well-being of the child.
Thank you, ma'am. Last question to Ms. Sibyl Licht from ARD.
Ja, guten Tag. Eine erste Frage an Frau Baerbock.
One first question to Minister Baerbock. You have already said Germany is making 1 billion euros to India for a faster transformation process, a switch to solar energy, phasing out coal finally, because electricity production from coal is still a big part of energy supply in India. What do you think about the time frame? How fast can India phase out coal? Because that was a hot topic being discussed at the climate conference in Egypt. And
Jaishankar, India has extended the import of Russian oil. It is a totally opposite position of the European sanctions, actually. Will you change your attitude during the G20 presidency? Thank you.
Mit Blick auf den Kohleausstieg
well, when it comes to
muss das
phasing
natürlich
out
jedes
coal,
Land selber entscheiden.
every country needs to decide for itself. I remember very well how difficult it was for us to start phasing out of coal in Germany. Back then I was a member of parliament, I was not yet foreign minister, and 7 years ago there have been debates in Germany about whether you could even speak about phasing out coal, because phasing out coal meant that many jobs linked to that would be lost. So in Germany it was very important that we do this phase out together with the trade unions, with the companies involved, that we have a social security scheme to buffer the effects for people, and we've made billions of euros available in Germany for that, both when it comes to social security for the people involved and also for developing the specific regions, especially in the east of Germany, that were affected by that phase out. So I will not travel the world as a foreign minister and tell others you have to do this way. It is something that you need to do on the ground, and what is important, I think, is what we've learned in Germany. You can have a smooth process. It is not a disruption, and this is something we can feed in as ideas and suggestions to other partners. So the Paris Agreement clearly states that by 2050 industrialized nations need to become climate neutral, and all the other countries in the middle of towards the end of the century. And what we've seen is that we need to phase out faster, and at the climate conference some states highlighted this very clearly. As the EU, we have even raised our ambitions with our climate goals. In India and Germany, we have started a special partnership on climate to accelerate the process. When it comes to per capita emissions, we have to say clearly that India is clearly below the per capita emissions of Germany or the EU. And at the same time, India is one of the most populous nations of the world. So the government has made it clear that when it comes to emissions, there needs to be a switch, there needs to be a sort of phase out, and the billion for 2023 is dedicated to many projects for renewable energy sources. We will travel to a village tomorrow where renewable energy sources are being used. That is a big opportunity for countries that need further electrification. And this electrification should not be based on fossil fuels, as the industrialized nations have done in the past, but that all areas switch to renewable energies immediately. This is what this money is intended for, but also for the mobility sector and agriculture.
On your question about fossil fuel imports from Russia, I think first we need to establish the facts very clearly. The European Union between February 24th and 17th November has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined. Just as I were to give you an India comparison, the oil import in European Union is like 6 times what India has imported. Gas is infinity times because we don't import, whereas European Union has imported $50 billion worth, 50 billion euros worth. Even coal imports from Russia by European Union, I'm not singling any particular country, is 50% more than India has imported. So the remark that you made that this is the way the European Union is going and this is the way India is going, I would very respectfully suggest maybe European Union is actually doing something very much more than India is doing at this point of time. Having said that, look, I think we need to have an understanding among governments and frankly even within the media. There is a finite amount of energy resources available in the world. I understand there is a conflict situation. I also understand Europe has a point of view. And Europe will make the choices it will make. That is your right. But for Europe to make choices which prioritizes its energy needs and then ask India to do something else. And bear in mind, today Europe is buying a lot from the Middle East. Now, Middle East was traditionally a supplier for an economy like India. So it puts pressure on prices in the Middle East as well. So we have been very, very understanding of European choices and European policies. I think my own sense is most governments in the world, European governments get it. I wish European media also got it. It would be very helpful. I would urge you to look at these figures. There's actually a website called Russia Fossil Fuel Tracker. It would give you, country by country who's really importing it. And I suspect that might be very, very helpful.
Thank you, Honourable Ministers. That concludes today's ceremony. I thank you all for joining.